So now in this video, we are going to discuss the ciliary body and the ciliary processes. So we first of all will find out the extent of the ciliary body. So ciliary body actually extends from the ora serrata till the level of the ciliary processes. So ora serrata is actually the anterior margin of the retina. So you can see this retina. This is the sensory portion of the retina, and at the termination of the sensory portion of retina, we have the ora serrata, and then from the ora serrata till the level of ciliary processes, we have this whole ciliary body. And on the interior or the base side of the ciliary body, we have this whole structure, which is the vitreous body. Now in this, we have the retina. Then this we have the ora serrata. From the ora serrata till the ciliary processes, as I told you, there will be the ciliary body. Now the ciliary body has two layers: the posterior 2/3 and the anterior 1/3. This posterior 2/3, this is the pars plana. It is actually a very much pigmented layer, whereas the pars plicata, the anterior 1/3, it is very pale and it has 70 to 80 ciliary processes radiating from it. Now when we come to this diagram of the ciliary body, which is like this, and these are the ciliary processes. From the ciliary processes, we have certain fibers that are radiating, and they are going to converge onto the lens capsule. These are actually the zonular fibers. These are radiating from the ciliary processes and going to the lens capsule, and they are the zonular fibers. Another name from them is the ciliary zonula, which are radiating from ciliary processes to insert into the lens capsule, and they constitute of the suspensory ligament of the lens. They are going to hold the lens in that place. Now we are going to study about the whole layers of the ciliary body. So now the ciliary muscle is actually composed of smooth muscle, which are further divided into longitudinal or meridional fibers, the radial fibers, and the circular fibers. And the lens is held in place by the ciliary zonula, which are going to be processes which are going to extend from the ciliary processes. The contraction and relaxation of the ciliary muscles, it results in changing in the shape of the lens due to the contraction and relaxation of those zonular fibers, and it is just required for the process of accommodation to see any far object and to see a close object. This whole particular thing is known as the accommodation power of the lens. And now we will see the three different types of muscles: the longitudinal arrangement, the radial, and the circular arrangement of ciliary muscles. Now if we have a look at this diagram, then we can clearly see these longitudinal fibers, which are also known as meridional fibers, then these radial fibers, and then these circular fibers. So externally we have the longitudinal or meridional, then we have the radial, and then we have the circular fibers of the ciliary body. And then we have the ciliary processes that are radiating outwards. Now we are going to discuss the ciliary stroma. And this ciliary stroma is a very contactual or middle layer that is present between the ciliary epithelium on the interior side and the ciliary muscles on the exterior side. Now the ciliary stroma is actually made up of loose connective tissue as well as blood vessels. Also, since it is made up of connective tissue, so it will have a large number of collagen fibers in its ground substance. Along with that, it will have a large number of fenestrated capillaries. So it's a connective tissue, and in the connective tissue we have collagen fibers, and then we have blood vessels, which are actually fenestrated capillaries, and these capillaries are very much adjacent to the ciliary epithelium, and that is how this vascular layer or the ciliary layer, it provides its epithelium with the nutrition. All the other layers are provided with the diffusion and active transport, whereas the ciliary stroma has certain ciliary blood vessels, and these blood vessels are going to supply the nutrients as well as the food to the ciliary epithelium. So now we have two layers. Firstly, we have this layer, which is known as the inner pigmented cells, and then we have the outer layer, which is known as the outer layer, that is made up of pigmented cell, and this is the inner layer because we are going from the exterior to the interior side. So this is going to be interior one, and then it is going to give rise to the aqueous humor. Now first of all, we talk about these pigmented cells of the ciliary body epithelium. These pigmented cells are pigmented because they have a large amount of these melanin pigments present in them, and these cells are actually cuboidal in nature. And due to the melanin pigments, so the outer pigmented layer, it is made up of pigment epithelium of retina. So it is very much continuate with the pigment epithelium of the retina. So if we come up with retina, retina has two layers, an inner layer, outer layer, which is the pigment epithelium, and the inner layer, which is known as the sensory portion. So with the pigment epithelium, we have the pigmented layer of the ciliary epithelium, and this pigmented layer of ciliary epithelium has brownish black granules, which are actually melanin pigments, as well as these cells are cuboidal cells, which are single layered. But on the summit or the highest point of the ciliary processes, we have less pigmented layer, and this is why the interior of the cells, it is having pigment, whereas the exterior has whitish appearances, and this is how the exterior or the ciliary processes have whitish appearance, because melanin pigments do not go to that region. Now the inner non-pigmented layer of the ciliary epithelium. Now this inner or non-pigmented layer of the ciliary epithelium has a large amount of mitochondria, Golgi apparatus as well, and these are all well developed. And on the lateral side, we have the plasma lemma, which is folded and it forms the lateral interdigitations. And then and this plasma lemma also has a large number of the sodium channels. Then on the apex, which is the apex side, we have a large number of tight junctions as well as gap junctions. So these gap junctions are to allow the communication with the pigmented cells, and the tight junctions are to hold the side by side cells with each other. Another thing about these in inner non-pigmented cells is that they are going to secrete the aqueous humor or the aqueous fluid of the eye. Then the pigmented cells are cuboidal in shape, whereas these cells are tall columnar in shape. Now, one thing about these inner non-pigmented cells is the junctions that they have within them. The tight junctions are important because they are going to make the blood aqueous barrier of the eye. Now we will come to know about aqueous humor. So now first of all, we are going to study about the aqueous humor. As I told you, it was formed by the inner pigmented layer, and that non-pigmented layer was made up of columnar cells, and these columnar cells of the ciliary epithelium, they provide the filtrate of the plasma, and from the ciliary stroma, this aqueous humor moves into the ciliary epithelium, and it is a clear fluid and it has same composition as plasma, but it is free of the proteins. Now we will talk about the drainage of the aqueous humor through a diagram. So first of all, we need to find out one major location, that is the iris. And you know the distance between two iris, it is known as the pupil. So now iris divides this chamber into an anterior and a posterior chamber. Now we have the ciliary process in the posterior chamber, and these posterior chamber ciliary processes and their non-pigmented cells give rise to the aqueous humor. Now this aqueous humor moves from the posterior chamber through this pupil to the anterior chamber, and from the anterior chamber it moves into this iridocorneal junction, that is the junction between the iris and the cornea. From this iridocorneal junction it moves firstly into the trabecular meshwork, from that it moves into the canal of Schlemm, from that it moves into the collector channel, from that it moves into the scleral and episcleral veins. So this is the whole drainage pathway of the majorly our aqueous humor formed by the ciliary processes. Non-pigmented cells moves from the posterior chamber to the anterior chamber through this pupil, and from the anterior chamber it goes into the trabecular meshwork, from the trabecular meshwork into the canal of Schlemm, from the canal of Schlemm into the collector channel, and that to the scleral and episcleral veins. Now to understand the blood aqueous barrier, we have this diagram, and it is very much important, but you can see it is the main diagram. So first of all, we know that interiorly we had the stroma, and from the stroma we had this inner non-pigmented layer, and from the inner non-pigmented layer we come to the outer pigmented layer, and then we have this layer which is of the canal of Schlemm. So the gap junctions that are present between the endothelial lining of stroma, not the gap junctions but the tight junctions, then the tight junctions between the inner non-pigmented cells, tight junction between the outer pigmented cells, and the tight junction between the endothelial lining of canal of Schlemm. This whole apparatus, which is made up of 4 layers and 4 of their tight junctions, they are going to prevent the aqueous humor formed in the posterior chamber to be leaked or to be connected to the blood. So here we are going to have the blood. If I write it over here, here we are going to have the blood, and here we are going to have the aqueous humor, and these 4 layers are going to prevent the blood and aqueous humor to actually have a mixture with each other, or to be mixed with each other. Now the formation as well as drainage of that aqueous humor that we studied a little bit earlier, it is very much important. Whenever there is going to be increased production of that aqueous humor, or whenever there is going to be decreased drainage of that aqueous humor, there will be a raised intraocular pressure. Intraocular means inside the eyeball. So this amount of aqueous humor which is accumulating, it is going to increase the intraocular pressure, and now it is going to damage the retina, that was the neuronal layer of the eye, as well as the optic nerve, which is the main nerve that carries the information to brain, and thus the gradual loss of vision will be observed. And now this increase in the intraocular pressure, it occurs due to, as I told you, defective drainage of the aqueous humor, or there is certain obstruction of the trabecular network of canal of the Schlemm. So either it is decreased drainage due to certain obstruction, etc., or either there is increased production of the whole apparatus which is known as the aqueous humor, and due to that we have glaucoma, which is mainly going to affect our cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve, and the retina of our eye. With that, we come to end of our ciliary body. I hope you understood each and everything related to ciliary body, aqueous humor, and the blood aqueous barrier.